In this tutorial, we're going to create a comic book effect in Photoshop. So we're going to use some basic filter functions to get an image that used to look something like that to end up looking something like that. And we'll use some basic photo manipulation techniques on this as well. So the first thing that you need to do is you have Photoshop open. There's nothing open in it at the moment. I'm going to drag in a source image straight into my Photoshop workspace. The first thing that we need to do to make sure that the results that you get are similar to mine later on when we use the pixelate function, we need to make sure that our canvases are all the same size. So to make sure that they are, I'm going to go to image size, and in the resolution I'm going to type in 150 pixels per inch or 150 dpi, but the height I'm going to reduce down to 1000 pixels. I'm just going to zoom out of my image by holding down Alt and scrolling backwards, and I now need to remove the background around this photograph, so I've just got the character on his own. To remove the background from any image, we need to have a layer underneath so that we can have some kind of transparency going on. So the first thing we need to do is unlock this background layer. We can see a little lock here. If you click on it, it'll go away. And now we can create a new layer, and then we can drag that layer underneath of our original image like this. I'm just going to make sure that the top layer is selected, the main photograph, and I can see what selection method is going to work best. If you have quite a detailed background, you may have to use the polygonal lasso tool, which is over here. Just click and hold and choose the polygonal lasso tool, and you may have to manually click and do a dot to dot around your character and select areas and then go ahead and delete them. Fortunately for this image, the background should be pretty much easy to do like this. I'm going to go over to the quick selection tool. The shortcut for that is W. Click and hold and make sure you are not on the magic wand tool, but you're on the quick selection tool, and then go and drag blocks of color like this, and it should start to flood fill your image like this. So I'm just clicking and dragging without letting go, and it will do that. Now for me, it's selected slightly more than I wanted it to. For some reason, it selected his ear. With the quick selection tool on, I'm just going to hold down Alt on the keyboard so that I can remove a section like this. And again, holding down Shift will add a selection. You can see the cursor change from adding or taking away. You can also use these buttons up here to do that. So I'd like to remove some of this selection. It's gone in, it's flooded in too far. So I'm just going to remove his sleeve like this. And the side of his face over here is also gone a bit crazy. Okay, and if the things are too similarly coloured, I will then go over to my polygonal lasso tool, and I'm going to add to the selection now. Because if I hold down Shift, I can draw a little selection shape like this, a nice smooth edged shape, and then go and finish it off over there, and that should be fine. If I hold down Alt, I can remove like this, and now that I've got the background completely selected, I can go ahead and hit delete. Import your first background image. So I've got an image of an alley like this. Obviously it's a bit small, I'm just going to enlarge that. To enlarge an image and can keep its constraints, I'm holding down Shift and Alt. Shift keeps it into proportion, and Alt resizes it from the center. So I'm just going to resize this image like this. And once I'm happy with the scale and the position of it, I'm going to hit Enter so that this cross goes away. I'm going to drag that down underneath our main character there. Now that I've imported this image, if we look at the thumbnail of the alley image, we can see it's got this little icon on it, which means it's going to be hard or impossible to do any significant edits to it. So as long as we're happy with the scale, I'll right click and rasterize that layer, and you see the icon will disappear, and we're now free to do whatever we like to it. I'm now going to go to flip the image, edit, transform, flip horizontal, and I could even maybe resize it a bit more and keep the main character. I might even move the main character so that his head's slightly more in the highlight of the end of the alleyway down there. I want to make sure that the main character stands out from the background as much as possible, so I'm going to move our background, or this invisible layer here, layer 1 with nothing on it. I'm just going to move that in between our main character and the background. And I'm just going to add like a bit of fog behind his head just so that he stands out a bit more. So I'll just go over to my brush tool, the shortcut for which is B. And I'm going to change the colour of the brush tool to a colour that's in the image. And to do that, you just have your brush tool selected and hold down Alt, and then you can choose any colour. So if I just click and drag, you can see in this area down here, it's sort of colour picking all of these colours. So I'm going to choose some kind of yellow colour like this. And with the opacity of the brush set to 10% up here, I'm just going to very gently click away so it looks like there's some kind of fog behind him like that. And I think that looks a little bit perhaps too saturated, but it is a comic book, so it could work. I'm just going to do Control U and just drag the saturation down a little bit of that colour, and that should be fine. So it looks like there's a bit of fog in the alleyway, and now the main character stands out a bit better. Before I can make the background look like a comic book effect, I'm going to merge this fog layer with the alley. So I'm going to right click, merge layers. So now I've only got 2 layers to worry about. So to start with the comic book effect, I'm going to go to making sure the right layer is selected. I'm going to go to Filter, Filter Gallery, and then I'm going to go to the Artistic folder at the top, and then find Poster Edges. I'm going to set my edge thickness to 1, the intensity to 1, and the posterization to 3. And you can always have a pan around your image and see if it works. We're really looking for black outlines here. I'm not really too worried about reducing the number of colors yet. I'm just looking to see how use the edge thickness and edge intensity to see what are the best or the most intense outlines that we can get. And since this is a background, I think 1 is going to be okay for me. So I'll hit OK on that. The next step is to go to the filter gallery again. So it's filter and then filter gallery. Make sure you click on the third button down for this. The top one just repeats the last command. So I'm going to go to this filter gallery, and this time I'm going to go to choose cutout at the very top. I'm just going to zoom out a bit down here. And this time the settings, I'm going to use the following. I'm going to use the number of levels as 6. I'm going to choose simplicity as 4 and edge fidelity as 2. And again, these values will vary dramatically depending on what image you're using. Essentially now you should end up with something that looks quite comic book like, complete with black outlines on most objects. And also, well, we've reduced the number of colours. For something in the background, I might increase the simplicity slightly, and so that we have more detail on foreground characters. So I'm going to actually set the edge simplicity up to 5. So it depends on your image. Hit OK. So now we're going to add those dots, that printed dot effect to the background. And to do that, we need to duplicate our background layer. So I'm going to go to Duplicate Layer and hit OK. I'm then going to go to Filter, Pixelate, Color Halftone, and I'm going to use the following settings. The max radius needs to be 6 pixels. If you leave these values in here, it will create colorful dots, or if you type in 45 in all of the values instead, it'll leave you with a standard black or grey colored dots. And so I'm going to go ahead and hit OK on that. And it's going to look quite ugly to start with. And so all you need to do to make it look a bit better is to change the layers blending mode to soft light. And then you can drag the opacity of that layer down to about 50% or whatever you feel is enough. It just means that in certain areas we should see these little dots appear like that. Okay, so now I'm going to import a futuristic weapon. So I'm just going to drag this in. I'm going to drag this to the top. I'll hit enter, drag it to the top layer. I'm going to flip it, edit, transform, flip horizontal. And then I'm going to erase the background from that gun using my quick selection tool. And then I'll go ahead and before I can hit delete, I have to right click on the layer because I can see it's currently as a smart object and I can't delete stuff. I have to right click, rasterize layer, and then hit delete. I can now probably just get my eraser tool out and just get rid of some of these lines that may be left around the edges, like this. And now I can go ahead and hit Control T to resize the weapon and just put it into place over here. It's going to make it roughly about, maybe a bit bigger than the original gun, but something like that will be fine. Now, to give this weapon a bit of perspective, I go to Edit, Transform, Perspective, and drag the top up like that. You can maybe give it a bit of an angle if you want, but this should be okay for me. I'm just going to move it into position like that. And then to make it look 3D, I'm just going to move it to the right a bit. I'm going to duplicate this layer. I really obviously can right click and go to duplicate layer, or you can hit Control J, or you can just hold down Alt on the keyboard, and as you hold down Alt you'll see your cursor change to like a copy icon. If you click on Alt and then move that gun to the left, you'll see you now have two weapons, or you can just hit go to duplicate by right clicking. And I moved it to the left like this, and now I can have a go at just painting it to look like one 3D object. So I'm just going to merge these two layers together by right clicking and going to merge layers, and then I'm just going to drag the opacity down a bit, and now I'm just going to sort of erase the areas behind where his fingers are. So I've got the eraser tool out. I'm just going to rub this out. I'm going to use a hard edged brush like this. Perhaps where the camera starts to go out of focus over here, I can drag the hardness down to about 88% or something like that, just because his finger's slightly blurry here, and should look a bit more convincing. And now I can drag this opacity of this layer back to 100%, so that it looks like his hands are around the hilt of the gun. And now I'm going to paint in the front, just so it looks like it's not two pieces of sort of paper cut out of the weapon. So I'm going to go over to my paintbrush tool. I'm going to make my brush a lot smaller, so if I right click and choose a much smaller brush, again probably a hard edged brush, and I'm going to go ahead and just sort of opacity, set that to 100%. I'm just going to go ahead and just sort of paint in a general area over here, and I know that in a moment I'm going to use a comic book effect on this as well, so it doesn't really matter if it looks quite unconvincing at the moment. It should look good in a bit. So again, if you're trying to cover up anything that looks like it's been copied from the original one, that will help in a minute when we do the comic book effect, and just try and join up any edges like this. Okay, so that should help. And now I'm going to be able to merge that with the layer of a main character. I can go to Merge Layers. Okay, and before we add the poster effect to this, I'm just going to go in and put the muzzle flash in. So if you drag in or Google search for muzzle flash image, you should get something like this. And then we can go ahead and I'm going to actually remove all the black from this. So we could use the screen blending mode for this, which would work well. But because I need to use this later in After Effects as its own layer, and it needs to be merged with things that can't have that blending mode, I'm just going to set it to normal, and I'm going to go to let's resize it a bit. That's Control T, and then I'm going to go to Select Color Range, and I'm going to select the black areas around the muzzle flash and drag the fuzziness to 200%, hit OK, and then hit delete. It's going to send me an error message because I haven't rasterize my layer. I can hit delete, and we should be left, if I hit Control D to deselect, with the muzzle flash like this. So I'm going to just put that over over there. And again, because I want this to be its own layer in After Effects, I am going to uncrop my document like this, just so I can let it fill in. Now that we have a muzzle flash on the gun, I need to make it look like it's actually casting light onto our character, so it looks a bit more convincing. To do that, I am going to just select an orange colour. So if I get my paintbrush out and choose just a standard orange colour like this, and I'm going to paint essentially over to our main character. But before I do that, I need to create a new layer before I start painting so that I preserve this layer just in case something goes wrong. And I also don't want to paint outside of the silhouette of the character. So at the moment you can see if I just paint, it's painting all the way out and flooding into the rest of our image. However, if I hold down Control on the keyboard and click on the thumbnail like this, you can see it's created a selection around the shape of whatever's on that layer. Even if you have another layer selected, when we go ahead and paint, it's going to be constrained to the silhouette of that layer underneath that we just selected, which is really useful. So with a colour like this sort of orange selected, I want you to change the blending mode of this layer to colour dodge. And I've got the opacity of my brush set to about 60 or 70%. And I can just have a go at painting over certain areas like this. It may not quite work for you. You may have to change your opacity or even the colour. But if you choose a nice soft brush, if you right click and choose a nice soft brush, about 200 pixels, you should be able to sort of add a colour like that. I'm just going to drag the opacity down a bit. And I might even just make the colour slightly less saturated. And so I can just add a bit of highlight to his hands. And also to the weapon as it's being fired, it may light up as well. Okay, I'm just going to drag in some sparks as well. These should already be as a transparent layer from Google Images. I can resize those down. That was Control T, and then move them into place and hit Enter. And now we're ready to make this look like it's a comic book as well. So I'm going to merge these three layers and go to Merge Layers. So with the layer with our main character on selected, I will go to Filter, Filter Gallery, and go to Poster Edges. And the settings that I will have with poster edges with edge thickness as 1, edge intensity as 2, and posterization as 3. And again, I'm looking for nice lines and outlines appearing on as many things as possible between fingers on the weapon. Unfortunately, it also accentuates hairy arms like that, but the next cutout effect should smooth that out. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK on that. The next step, we're going to go ahead and use the cutout effect to smoothen the colours out and make it look a bit more like block colours. Unfortunately, it's going to make the eyes look very low detail, and it's really important that you keep the eyes of your characters usually as a focal point, and so you want to make sure that you keep as much detail as possible in there, usually more detail than you'd find in the rest of them. So I'm going to select the eyes of this character. So I went over to the rectangular marquee tool, or M, on the keyboard, and let's draw over his eyes like that. And with the layer select, I'm just going to hit Control C and then do to copy it. I'm just going to hit Control D to deselect everything as well, and I'll paste them later. So now with the layer with the man on selected, I can go to Filter, Filter Gallery, and go to Cutout. And the settings I'm going to choose are 6 for levels, 4 for simplicity, and 2 for edge fidelity, and hit OK. So again, it's smoothed out some of these over here, but his eyes, we've lost all the information in his eyes. So I want to paste the layer that we just copied earlier, and to paste it in place, I'm going to do Control-Shift-V. If you don't hit Control-Shift-V and just do Control-V, it may paste your image in the middle of the document, and you'll have to line it up. So if you do Control-Shift-V, it will paste exactly where it came from. Now I can go to Filter, Filter Gallery, and I've got the eyes here, and this time, number of levels I'm going to set to 8. Edge simplicity I'm going to drag down to about 3, and edge fidelity I'm going to drag up to 3 as well. So that is fine. I'm going to hit OK on that, and again you can just turn that layer on and off to see the detail that it adds. It's not much, but the extra information in the eyes really does help. To make this blend in better, I'm going to go over to the Eraser tool, or E, and right click and choose a soft brush of about 50 pixels, with the opacity set to 100% and just draw around his eyes like that. And again, you can turn that layer on and off and see the difference that it makes. I now need to merge those eyes of the main character. So to merge my layers, I'll shift select them both, right click and go to merge layers. So they're all together now. And now I'm going to duplicate our main character. The shortcut for that is Control J. And now we have a duplicate copy of a main character. And this time we're going to go ahead and do that pixelation effect. So that's filter, pixelate, color halftone. The max radius is 6 and the rest is all 45. I'm going to hit OK on that. I'm going to go to soft light over here and drag the opacity down to 50%. And now we've finished posterizing or adding a comic book effect to this image. And if you want to go ahead and animate this in After Effects, you should merge any layers that you want together. So all I really want is a foreground and a background for this. So I can save that out as a JPEG, and I can save this out as a PNG. So to make sure I save this as transparency, I'll turn off the background, I'll poke it in the eye, so we're just left with the character like this, and then I'll go to File, Save As, and go ahead and save it as a PNG. And as long as you can see the checkerboard squares behind here, it means that you'll have transparency later when you save it.